Ken Gooderham, are you online and ready to go?
Yes.
Bruce, when do you get back to Florida?
I'm coming back a week today.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I was saying to Ken, it's getting cold up here. It's like 45 this morning. So,
Oh, really? You don't want anything to do with that?
no, I don't. About 40 degrees too cold here for me. But nice fall colors.
All right, well, let's start roll call. Welcome everybody to the October 10th meeting of the Captiva Community Panel. So we'll start off with the roll call. I'm Jay Brown, David Mintz.
Here. Good morning, everyone.
Linda Laird.
Good morning, all.
Hi, Linda.
Morning.
Tony Lappy.
Here.
Hi, Tony.
Morning.
Marguerite Maville. Marguerite, you around?
Good morning. I'm here. Good morning.
Oh, good. Bruce McDonald.
Yep, here.
Ken Gill.
Here.
John Jensen. Here, Jay. Ann Brady.
Morning.
Sandy Stillwell.
Good morning.
And Bob Walter.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Bob. Okay, first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Could I have somebody approve a motion for the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes for the
A
last.
second, please.
Second.
Any discussion of the minutes? No. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, our first item up on the agenda is to get a recap from David on where we are with the county plan and the changes and so forth and what might be going on right now. So, David, I guess the floor is yours for a few minutes.
Thank you. I'll try to summarize where we are at this point without repeating what everybody, I believe, already knows. What you do know is that the land development code, which increases the density and building heights on Captiva, cannot be enacted without plan amendments also taking place, amendments to our Lee County Comprehensive Plan that applies to Captiva. So when these land development code amendments were passed on September 5th, they also had to enact plan amendments to the Lee plan to eliminate the goal of 1- and 2-story homes on Captiva and to eliminate the building heights of 28 feet above base flood elevation, which the county proposed to do in the plan amendments. But those plan amendments have to be adopted before the land development code amendments are adopted because they have to be consistent with each other. So the plan amendments, to adopt them, the county has to transmit those proposed plan amendments to the state of Florida for their various state Florida agencies for their comments. and the county transmitted the plan amendments, those two plan amendments, which I just described, to the state on September 7th, which is about a month ago. The county has 30 days, actually to October 6th, which was the other day, to comment on those proposed plan amendments by the county, the plan amendments that the county passed on September 6th. At the time that the county transmitted its plan amendments to the state, the attorney, our attorney representing the various Captiva organizations, submitted a legal memo to the various state agencies. The legal memo basically incorporated 5 points. One, I'll just review them quickly. One is the attorney's memo advises the state agencies that the county failed to accurately describe the proposed amendments in their report that they sent to the state, failing to mention that the lead plan amendments that they sent were made to facilitate changes in the land development code, which would permit higher buildings and more hotel rooms than currently allowed on Captiva. That was not mentioned in the transmittal to the state. The memo from our attorney also advised state agencies that the amendments constitute an up-planning of development on Captiva, which is not supported by any data and analysis required by the Community Planning Act. There was no data and analysis, which basically analyzed the effects of these amendments on the island's infrastructure, its roads, its hurricane evacuation routes, its water resources, its septic systems, its sewer project, or any of the environmental resources. The county also failed to recognize that these amendments granted special benefits to a single property owner on South Seas, which may constitute inappropriate spot planning and raises serious constitutional issues of equal protection. We talked about the equal protections before, which is why does one developer or one property owner on Captiva get more density and higher buildings than other resorts or other property owners on South Sea, on Captiva. Finally, the memo from our attorney makes it clear that the amendments have little to do with resiliency and will only make Captiva less resilient and less safe when facing future hurricanes. Our attorney concludes by asking the state agencies to agree that these amendments are an unacceptable response to the devastation wrought last year by Hurricane Ian, and to so advise the county. Okay, so the county transmitted its amendments to the state. We submitted our legal memo to the state. The state had until October 6th to comment. Yesterday was a holiday. As we sit here today, we don't know if the state agencies commented to the county or what their comments were, if they commented. So we should do that within a day or two, and we'll get that out to everybody as soon as we get that information. Once the comments come in from the state, and the county will then evaluate the comments of the state, and then they will have to set an adoption hearing. They will have to adopt various amendments to the lead plan. Whether they adopt them as they currently stand, whether they change them, whether they negotiate with the state, whether they do anything, we don't know. And we really won't have a sense of that until we see what the state comments are, if there are any state comments at all that the county will have to review. In the past, these are often ministerial amendments that the state really doesn't weigh in on. And over time, the state has weighed in less on these than they have in the past with comprehensive changes to, with amendments to comprehensive plans. But we're hoping that the state will have something to say about these. Okay, so once the county gets the state comments, they will set an adoption hearing. Our attorney will send a legal letter. When I say our attorney, I'm talking about the attorney of the various organizations on Captiva. The attorney will send a legal letter to the Board of County Commissioner regarding the adoption hearing, and I suspect explaining again why those amendments should not be adopted. The community may have to organize itself at that adoption hearing. Again, that's something we don't know yet. The county has actually 6 months to set an adoption hearing after they get the comments back from the state. So again, this is an open issue that we can't really resolve in either the timing or what we'll do until we get more information. Once the county adopts, if the county adopts the amendments as they currently stand, then the community will have to decide whether they litigate that. And the lawsuit would basically claim that it endangers our barrier island, is inconsistent with the other sections of the land development code and the comprehensive plan. That will then take place after the county decides what it's going to do with respect to the adoption hearing. If the amendments are adopted, the next step would be a zoning application from the timbers at South Seas. And that zoning application will be a request for whatever buildings that South Seas or Timbers wishes to construct, whether it includes higher buildings, greater density as they now ask for, remains to be seen. I am confident that the community will intervene in that application, which goes before a zoning officer or a magistrate or a officer, that those whatever that plan is, to the extent that it places Captiva in danger with respect to resiliency and our building heights and our density, that will be thoroughly litigated during that zoning application. So that's where we are today.
Can you take a couple of questions, David?
I will take as many questions as people have.
Okay, all right, first off, the state agencies, which your comments, which are via the attorney were submitted to, one, they're not under an obligation to provide comments. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So whether they make comments or not, are voluntary.
Correct.
Okay, so if they do make comments, the Board of County Commissioners, are they required to respond to those comments in any way, or is that just advice from the state agencies to the Board of County Commissioners?
I think somewhere on the continuum, I would put it to the advice side as to rather than the compel side. But if the state has strong concerns about those amendments, I think the county would.
When you say the state, you mean one or more of the state agencies that these have gone to.
That's correct. And I think that it behooves the county to respond to them. The practice generally would be that they would contact the state, they would work with the state, figure out what the real concerns are, make a decision as whether the amendment should be modified in some way, or they work it out, or they ignore the state. I don't think it's good practice to ignore the state, so I suspect they wouldn't do that. But again, it's speculation because we don't know if and
Yeah, right. But David, if you go through all the points that our attorney raised, I mean, they seem awfully valid to me. The fact that the county did no analytical work whatsoever, to determine the impacts of these things, on the community. That
right. I think that I think you're right. Obviously we agree with you.
Yeah.
but I think that historically over the recent years, there's been great deference to county legislators. When I say county legislators, I'm talking about the Board of County Commissioners.
Right.
There's deference to the localities, to the counties, to devise their own amendments and to pass their own amendments with respect to the comprehensive plans. And so I think there will be deference to it. I think they will comment or comment critically to the extent that they really feel there's something seriously amiss. And so, and I believe there's something seriously amiss, but it doesn't mean they will think that. And so we just don't know. We just don't know, Jay.
Okay, so let's assume that some of the state agencies, make comments. And let's say that those comments were, for all practical purposes, ignored by the county.
Right.
Do we have any any remedy available to us at that time?
Yeah, I think that if the county ignores valid comments from the state, and again, that's a big
Yeah,
if we get valid comments and if the county ignores them, I think those are two things that are not extremely highly likely. But if that happens, I think then it's up to the community to decide whether they challenge those plan amendments, which are adopted through a legal proceeding, which basically either you can claim that the land development code amendments, which will then be passed and become effective with the plan amendments that are passed, you can claim that those land development code amendments are either inconsistent with other parts of the land development code, or you can claim that those amendments are inconsistent and contradict the rest of the comprehensive plan, other aspects of the comprehensive plan. So there are avenues for litigation, avenues to challenge those plan amendments in the land development code, and they will have to be weighed carefully by the community and the various organizations, because there are attorney fee provisions that the state passed over the past couple of years, which allow prevailing parties to collect attorney's fees from the side that loses. And so therefore one has to carefully consider what litigation trail you follow in order not to be susceptible to some serious attorney fee damage awards.
all right, well, let's take, for example, the failure of the county to, undertake any study of impacts, of the changes on the community.
Right.
So, for example, no analysis of impacts on evacuation time.
Right.
No analysis of impacts to Central Sewer Project. No analysis of impacts to the fire department.
Right.
To to put out fires.
Right.
Okay. So using those as examples, we would argue that the county didn't do those, and that needs to be done
Right.
before these amendments,
Right.
are adopted.
Right. And we would claim it violated the Community Planning Act of the
Right.
state. Right.
And
Correct.
so what you're saying, though, is if a court somehow found that those objections we're raising are immaterial, then we would have to pay the county's legal fees as well as our own legal fees.
Depends how you craft the complaint. And I'm not prepared at this point to say until we see those amendments and until we see the comments and until we see what the county does, whether or not how we would approach that in terms of litigation. But there are some approaches that would allow prevailing parties to collect attorney fees, and there are some legal approaches that would not require the payment of attorney fees
Okay.
to the winning party. So again, those are the criteria one has to review when doing this. I mean, the state legislature has made it harder to challenge these kinds of amendments by passing prevailing attorney fee provisions, but they are still challenged and they're still challengeable. So we just have to make a reasonable, rational cost-benefit analysis once we understand the facts that we're facing.
Okay, and for this entire process to play out, it could take as long as 6 months.
Well, the county has, my understanding is the county has 6 months to respond to the comments from the state. I'd be surprised if they wait that long, frankly, since they've been moving very quickly on this. So it really depends on what the comments are, if there are comments, and then the county could wait up to 6 months, but my suspicion is they won't.
Okay.
Tony?
Yeah, just how long will it be for the state to get back to the BOCC?
Yesterday, they had to get back by the 6th.
They had to get back. Okay. Thanks.
And would we be copied, or would our attorneys be copied on any response that state agencies might provide?
We will get them. Our attorney is getting copies of them, yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's the next big step, and if none of that succeeds, then the next step is to wait for them to develop a specific plan and try to get approval for their development plans.
I think if the county passes the adopted amendments, then there'll be a determination as to whether to litigate about the land development code and the amendments based on the existing land development code regulations and plan amendments. If a decision that if that litigation takes place, that would not necessarily stop Timbers from submitting a planned application. They could be going on simultaneously. It's unlikely, I think, that a state would enjoin the process, but anything's possible. But leaving that aside, yes, the next step after litigation over the plan amendments in the land development code, assuming they're adopted and assuming the state comments don't happen or are ignored, then the next step would be a plan development application made by Timbers, which would then be submitted to the county and go through what the county is basically calling a rezoning process, because I guess the way they're seeing it is that the administrative interpretation that governs South Seas and governs Timbers, which has building heights and density in it, et cetera, will have to be amended. And that would be through this quote rezoning process where South Seas, where Timbers would make an application, and that application then would be reviewed by a hearing officer who would take testimony from the community and the various intervening parties to see if it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistent with other portions of the land development code, and consistent, compatible with the surrounding properties around wherever that application is being made.
Okay, but the objections that would be made at this point would not be related to the, if I understand this correctly, the county has changed, the rules which govern development
On South Seas, yes.
on South Seas.
Right.
But they still have to gain approval of a specific development plan.
Correct.
And if we decided to mount a resistance to that plan, it would not be based on the fact that South Seas was trying to get variances from a plan. Rather, it would be, well, here's the impacts if you do this, on the surrounding neighbors and so forth.
Yeah, I think depending on what Timbers proposes, which I don't know.
Yeah.
I've always felt that maybe all this could have been avoided a long time ago if they would have proposed a plan before the amendments took place in the land development code and the LEAP plan, so that people understood exactly what they were proposing. But that plan never came together, so we don't know. But once that plan is submitted, it may be that the objections will be based upon the increased density that would impact the evacuation route, which could affect wastewater, could affect fire department, could affect drinking water, could affect the environment in Pine Island Sound and the Gulf. I mean, we just don't know, but those are often the issues that a hearing officer looks at, is whether or not the infrastructure can support this kind of development that's being proposed. So the answer to your question, I guess, is yes. However, depending on what Timbers proposes, it still may in certain ways violate the development, other parts of the development code and the comprehensive plan. And so there may be a challenge with respect to those two things. Again, it's hard to know until you see what is being proposed.
Okay,
Hey, David,
I don't want to assume the worst. The problem that we faced up to this point is frankly not necessarily what Timbers has proposed. What we faced is that the county decided to put the cart before the horse and give the developer a blank check with respect to hotel density and building heights before they knew what was being proposed. And we were, as a community panel, were fundamentally ignored during this whole process. And that was the position that we were placed in as a community. And it was a very unfortunate process. And I suspect that portions of the county, I suspect the Timbers, and I suspect a lot of people wish it didn't come down this way. And but it did.
right.
hey, David, I have a question for you. Do we know what, if anything, from a legal perspective, the South Seas various homeowners association are doing?
Yes, at this point, what I know is that virtually all of the homeowners associations and condo associations on South Seas are extremely concerned with the potential increase in density on South Seas with respect to hotel units and possibly even other units. And they are unified in their opposition to they continue to be unified in their opposition to the proposed amendments, both to the plan and the code. And they are working closely with the rest of the community in devising a strategy to try to make the best of this situation.
Okay. Are they on the agenda later on?
No, I don't see him here, but they probably should have been.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just helpful for us to keep in, obviously keep aligned with them in terms of what
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
doing too, right?
Ken Suarez is there. If in terms of when I'm finished or you have your questions to me are completed, maybe we can ask Ken to make a comment.
Yeah, that's good.
If in response.
Yeah, that's good. If Ken Suarez is present at the meeting, we could promote him to a panelist. And
Yeah, if Ken could do that, that would be great. And then we could,
He already is, and I have one question from the audience, David. Ought we not do impact surveys ourselves, particularly if the new rules would significantly delay evacuation times? We need some PR ammo.
if in fact, Tim, yeah, I mean, I guess the question is asking is if in fact there is a plan development that's proposed that would affect evacuation routes and all the other infrastructural issues we've been talking about, we would be in a position with our attorneys not only to have legal intervention, but we would also do the studies that are necessary to that would have to reach the planning examiner or the hearing examiner so that she has accurate information about the impacts of the various changes. Yes.
do we have other questions for David? Well, let's see if Ken Suarez is present. Do you know if he's present?
Yeah, I'm here.
Ken, would you like to give us a brief update on how the
Sure.
various associations in South Seas are feeling about this and what actions you all might be planning to take?
Yeah, sure. So actually, a couple weeks ago, we had our first all owner Zoom meeting, which was highly successful. We had of our 547 owners, we had 220 present. So, and this was a meeting that was thrown together within like 10 days. So there's a lot of interest in what's going on at the resort. The resort continues to have their own information meetings with the owners, but they don't like very much to take questions that the owners submit, although they asked for them. The last meeting they had, they really didn't answer any questions. But I know that that we do have an owner at Land's End who happens to be an attorney. He's been going back and forth with one of the county attorneys, and ironically enough, that county attorney has contradicted himself so many times that he sort of has lost credibility with these guys down at Land's End. But obviously the interest is high, and there's just a minor percentage of people who are sort of like, you know, they won their case, and, you know, let them do what they want to do. But that's just a small fraction of people. But, you know, the associations are we are interested in our own property rights that we have. As a lot of people know or don't know, you know, 5 associations own a good part of the road leading down to the north end, and with some different studies that we're doing, we're trying to find out what our property rights are. So we're very interested. We're very active. We continue to meet on about a weekly or every other week basis, and we will continue to meet with our ownership group. But, you know, from my conversations with the county and the different steps that Timbers are going to have to go through to rezone, you know, obviously their property butts up to a lot of association property, and including timeshare property, and they are as actively against this as whole ownership. And so, you know, we're getting a lot of interest and support from the timeshare people as well.
Okay, do you have any specific legal next steps that you're thinking of, or?
Not at this time. I think that, you know, I'm privy to some of these legal meetings that are taking place, and I update our group on what's being done, and so I think that we're sort of best served, you know, encouraging our ownership to participate in the funding of the legal action taken by the community.
Right.
And, you know, within the resort, we have our own, again, our own property rights issues that our association attorneys have brought to light over the past few months that are interesting to us. And, you know, we'll see where it goes.
Okay. Ken, thank you for that report. Does anybody have questions of Ken? Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. At our last meeting, we agreed that for this meeting, we would like Ken Gooderham to do a brief review of what some of the governance options might be for Captiva going forward. Basis for this being is that historically we have always relied on the county, you know, to understand our Captiva plan and to enforce the plan, which they obviously did not do in this case. So some on the panel were interested in a review of what some of our governance options might be, such as forming a municipality or possibility of annexation with Sanibel as a way of getting more control over the development future of our island versus relying on county staff to understand and enforce the development wishes of our community. So, Ken, you prepared an extensive summary of what some of the governance options for Captiva would be. And I thought it would be good now for you to take the panel through that document you'd prepared.
I believe Linda's prepared a PowerPoint and I think she's ready to do that.
Okay, Linda's going to do it. All right.
Okay, and Ken, can you put up the PowerPoint? Possible. So and so I am summarizing Ken's document and pulling out what I consider the relevant points. There are other people here who may know more on certain items, and Ken may know more on it to add into the conversation. So,
Okay, but Linda, this is intended to be your summary of the document Ken prepared. Is that correct?
the summary of the document and what I may have found.
Which you learned too, and you're, yeah.
Right,
okay.
because I've talked to lots of historical people and called different people to see what I could find out as well.
Okay.
Okay? So what's the overall objective is we want to maintain the existing Captiva plan and allow more local control for our future land use and development redevelopment. That's what we're interested in. So in the last meeting, you all requested fact finding. Ken prepared a great document on this. We've looked at 5 different options. One is an annexation with Sanibel, another's incorporation. A third, which was proposed by SCCF, was designation of an area of critical state concern. Then there were 3 variations based on maintaining the status quo. And then there were other possible ones offered in the Florida statutes, which probably are not viable. So today what we're going to go is walk through the options, and the idea is at the end of it to have a discussion to determine what, if any, next step we want to do. As I said, the document describing the options are in the meeting materials, and they go into more detail. Okay, next slide. So here's a historical view. This is my view of the history after talking to lots of people. Captiva considered incorporation and annexation in the early 2000s in an attempt to get more control over our land development. It was very contentious, and I don't think any of us want to go back into the arguments and contention we had at that time. The result ended up with the legislature not passing the bill to incorporate Captiva. And I think as part of this agreement, the Captiva Community Panel then wrote the Captiva Plan, which became part of the Lee Plan. And that gave us our control over our land development. The panel worked with in leadership of the Captiva community. This is my view how it worked. Other people may have slightly ones, but this is the way and so the CCP and the CCA became the de facto voice and leadership of Captiva. Examples of what the panel has done is the coordination of the Ian recovery and community projects such as our sewer, our sea level rise, stormwater, telecom, trying to get bike paths in, all of that. That's what the panel did. The Captiva Code, in turn, was overturned by Lee County to support the Timbers Resort in September, and comments were made that they saw no need for the panel or something similar to that. And then we began legal action in September 2003. So that's my view of the history.
Okay, Linda, let me stop you here for a minute. I asked Mike Mullins to sit on this meeting because, you know, Mike was very involved back in this effort to incorporate Captiva. And I just want to see if Mike wants to make some comments about what the history of that was before you move on. Is that all right with you, or would you prefer to finish your
No,
entire?
no, sure.
Mike Mullins, are you around? Hello, Mike. Ken, do you know if he signed in as a
Mike,
panelist?
you're muted. Mike?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
anyway, yeah, at the time, we basically looked at three options. It was a separate governance committee. It was not aligned with the CCA, although the CCA sort of helped us get started. And there were three, incorporation was one and annexation was another and do nothing was the other. This SCCF idea was not on the table at the time. That sounds very intriguing. In any event, what we found is that unless there's people in the state legislature, and I mean a senator and assemblyman or whatever, who are willing to carry the ball forward. Back then, we couldn't find those people, even though they sponsored us to go before the county commission to discuss it. But there wasn't a lot of traction for being able to incorporate. And even though there are some requirements around incorporation that look like they could be obstacles, they've been overcome by other communities. But in the end, there wasn't a lot of support for it. Annexation at the time, we actually met with then Mayor.
Mike, excuse me. So you're saying, when you say there wasn't a lot of support for it, are you saying that just generally in the community,
No. What we did is we evaluated the alternatives, and just before the Civic Association members that came to the meeting, the general sense was people preferred incorporation, and annexation only had about 5 or 6% of support of the group. But then when we went to the state legislature, there wasn't anybody really willing to carry the water for us on it.
okay, so if you incorporate, you have to have, do you have to have a state senator and a state representative pushing this? You have to get approval
Well,
from the state?
that helps to basically get it through. But I don't know what your lawyers have said on that. Ken might have more information on that, but it definitely is going to be important to have somebody in the legislature carrying the ball for you.
Okay, but when we tried this before, you could not get anybody from the legislature that was interested in helping us become a city?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Although there was one, I think Senator Bert Saunders at the time felt that this should be a decision that's made by referendum and the people should decide. It didn't get any traction, and then also the county commissioners didn't really jump on board as well. So there wasn't a lot of support, and you also needed support from the neighboring community so that they wouldn't be objecting. So at the time, Sanibel wasn't particularly supportive either. They preferred that we look at annexation. So my personal focus at the time was to be the advocate for annexation, if you will. This was not based on, an actual choice as much as we focused the three choices that were available, and different individuals in the group, myself, Bob Lloyd, and Peter Corey, I believe, each tried to carry the water for a particular plan and be the knowledgeable person on that particular plan. I focused on the annexation. And just to tell you what that was about is I met with the mayor of Sanibel and all the city council members and their attorney and drew up a document. I have to see if I can find it. I'm up in Connecticut, it might be down in Florida, but we drew up a document basically laying out the terms of what we wanted. And at the time, sewer was a big obstacle on the part of a lot of Captivans who didn't want to have to join the sewer program. Things have changed, obviously, but that's the way it was at the time. And so we wanted to have a 10-year abatement on sewer fees so that people could gradually move into that mode, and we would eventually hook up to the Sanibel sewer. So we basically put all this out in a document, a memorandum of understanding with Sanibel, and we thought we had an understanding. And then suddenly one of the city councilmen jumped on a program of saying Captiva wants special privileges, meaning this carve out for sewer and so on. And it all sort of fell apart, even though they had signed the agreement and we were going to move forward on that basis. So that became a reason to reject Sanibel, because we were trying to negotiate and understand what the impact would be. And at the time, I think the Steve Brown, I think, was the one that said, go and sign on with us first, and then we'll sort all that stuff out later. And as a businessman, my perspective was, let's know what the facts are before we ask people to get on the program. And in order to annex, like was the situation with the iguana, we need to do a petition of everybody on island, and you need better than 50% of the owners of property on Captiva. So this would include South Seas. You'd need better than 50% to approve the petition. Now, we could also limit the portion of Captiva that would annex with Sanibel. We could stop it outside of the South Seas area, so that the rest of us would be managed and protected under Sanibel annexation, and South Seas would not. So none of this was ever sorted out, because in the end, the decision on the part of the Sanibel City Council, and I don't think they put it before council, it was based on individual meetings and with their attorney. They sort of started doing an about face on us and not appreciating the value, even to the point where at one stage they were saying they didn't have sufficient sewer capacity to take us on board. So it was really something that they didn't appreciate enough, the value of it. I would guarantee that today that's a very different perspective, and that you'd probably get a lot of support from Sanibel. But I would still encourage that if we were going to consider annexation, we negotiate as much of any special carve-outs that we want, or any special provisions that we want. Even though we would probably be very supportive of getting on board with a sewer now, there may be some other things that could have an impact on us. Do we want separate representation? Do we want a city council member that represents Captiva? Whatever it is, that all needs to be negotiated on the front end, so we have a better handle of where we would go with annexation. That's
Okay,
about all I have for now. Any questions?
yeah, so in regards to incorporation, you're saying there wasn't much at the time, there wasn't much support in the community to incorporate?
No,
No, there was more support to incorporate than to annex at the time.
it
The
was,
issue was being able to get it through the legal issues was a challenge, and it sort of just lost steam.
it was the
Okay.
legislature where there wasn't a lot of support. It was
Correct.
up in Tallahassee, there wasn't a lot of support.
Okay, so incorporation, you have to, that takes approval by our state legislature if we incorporate.
Yeah, we can go through that a little bit more if you want.
Okay, all right, well, all right. We
Mike.
paused there to get that history. Linda, why don't you continue
John
now?
has a question.
Yes,
Mike, this is John Jensen.
Yeah, hi, John.
Was there an event that happened that caused folks to want to annex or incorporate? Like here we have the Timbers event. So was there something that happened? What was it, sewers that was getting people to want to change governance?
It was something, John, Sandy. It was the Buck Key. But go ahead.
Okay. Buck Key got that all going. Okay. I wasn't sure if there was a major event, but thank you, Sandy.
So that helped, but I think there was also a general sense because of Buck Key and some other things. I guess who was it that was buying up Buck Key at the time? And anyway, it was an issue that basically got people to think that we didn't have enough home rule and we needed it. We wanted it, basically. So that kind of carried on. It was really several individuals, myself, Bob Boyd, and Peter Corey, and some others that said, hey, wouldn't we be better off having control of our own land use? And Buck Key was an example to do that. That was about it.
All right. Thanks, man.
I will say my conclusion in the end, and I backed away from incorporation then because of all the resistance we were getting, was that it was a bridge too far, that annexation or doing nothing were not the better alternatives, but the alternatives that were most feasible.
Okay.
Now, today, that's come a long way to the point where I would say, I would say the same thing today, except there's now a new alternative from SCCF on the table, which I don't know any details of.
Okay.
okay, Linda, you want to continue?
Sure. Here. Thanks, Ken. Okay, so the first option is this annexation with Sanibel. And sort of agreed to, at the beginning, to get engaged, if you will. We agree to begin the annexation process, and then typically Sanibel would prepare a feasibility study, which it would file with the county. That is just saying it's feasible. It's not saying it's happening, but that's the beginning of the process. Then Sanibel would hold 2 public hearings on this. Captiva property owners would vote on the ordinance. It's required that 50% plus of the strap owners plus 1 of property owners required for approval.
Now, Linda,
As-
is that a one-time vote, or is that a petition process, or?
That would be the one-time vote. There are other things there's other ways to do it, but they wouldn't work for Captiva, so.
So in other words, you would have to get,
It's like the MSTBU, it's like the iguana thing, it's exactly like the iguana thing.
well, but that's a petition. This is, if I understand you correctly, you've got 1 voting day. And all property owners would have to show up to vote. You'd have to get 50% plus 1. And if half of the property owners didn't show up to vote, it would be defeated, because if there's no vote, that's a no. Is that correct?
Well, it says that you can help me here, but unless more than 50% of the property owners in the annexation consent to annexation. So maybe it's by petition. Maybe it's by petition.
If I may, Linda,
Pardon?
unless it's changed since back then, it was definitely by petition. There was not going to be really a referendum. And like with the iguana petition, if people don't respond to the petition, that becomes a no vote. You really need better than 50% positive affirmative responses to the petition process. Now, they may be, something has changed since then, but that was my understanding.
So,
Okay, well, I guess
that's
that needs
easier.
further clarification, because it's a whole lot easier if you can do it by petition versus just a single voting day.
That's true. Okay,
Okay.
so I think I'm wrong on that. I think it's by petition instead. Ken, do you have a comment?
I believe it's by petition. Either we would control it, or it could be done through the elections office, but we'd have to negotiate that with them.
Okay, good. That's, as Mike was saying, there's various aspects that would need to be negotiated between Sanibel and Captiva. One is that we would want to be a separate planning district, I assume, so we would have our own, to be able to restore the Captiva code. Library, is it going to be a Lee County library, or is it going to be part of the Sanibel library? What the tax rates and the millage rates would be, what kind of.
Linda, you're not, your voice is, we're not hearing you.
Sorry. We'd have to work through those issues of like the library, tax rates, council representation, those kinds of things. Then Sanibel would need to approve the annexation. It might be by registered voters or by the council. It's a process that Sanibel would go through. If we all wanted to really do this, we can probably get it done in less than a year. Some problems might be that it can be appealed. We do not know the specifics of this statute, but it could be appealed by a party who feels it causes material injury to them. Another issue is that because we're coming into Sanibel, I mean, can Captiva really keep our own land use regulations, or with the state law, which takes all new municipalities back to the state law on how land use occurs, would we have to go to that? We assume we could have our own planning district and keep our own, but that would need to be clarified. Did you understand that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
Next.
hey, I had a question. I just had a question. So what at the time, maybe this is for Mike, at the time that this was looked at, was there any sense of what the economics of this look like for Sanibel? Because I would have thought that we're a huge net loser in terms of how much we pay versus how much we get.
We didn't get, that's a good point, but we didn't get as far on that as we should have. But I know we talked about things like, for example, in order to maintain, at the time, we had one policeman regularly on Captiva with maybe one backup. They required 5 people given vacation. There were some issues that they started spelling out that seemed, challenging to us, but they require 5 policemen. The fire department would be kept separately, but nobody sat down really to the point where, because it lost steam with Sanibel, we didn't sit down to the point where we laid out all the economics. But there's a lot of economic considerations, and we thought we would pick up some extra taxes on Captiva as a result. But you're right, there's a lot of money that would go into Sanibel's coffers with whatever our MSTU unincorporated taxes on our tax thing. It's usually $1 million to $2 million in that range. I don't know what the current number is, but that money would no longer be paid to Lee County. That would instead be done away with, but then our taxes would go up according to Sanibel's tax regulations. I don't know if that answers your question, Bruce.
Yeah. Well, I just would have thought that we're a net payer as opposed to a user of Lee County services. And so I just wondered if anyone looked at how much the net economic benefit, if there was a net economic benefit, if we paid the same amount of taxes to the city of Sanibel.
My sense, but without any detailed analysis on it, is that you're right. That money that no longer goes to Lee County would wind up not being paid by Captivans. Again, it's called the unincorporated municipal service tax. And again, the last time I looked at it, it was about $1.5 million. I'm not sure what it is currently, but it's probably
Okay.
Yeah, and our millage rate on that is about 0.89, I believe, for that part of your property tax.
Hey, Mike, this is Jeff with the fire department. Just real quick, most likely at this point, I know you mentioned the police and you said the fire districts would likely stay separate at the time. I can tell you at this point, the state would probably not want to have the fire district separate, and they would make you merge those as well. The state isn't necessarily look favorable on fire districts as far as they do on city governments running them. So the incorporated aspect, as far as the home rule on that is concerned, if you incorporated, the fire district could potentially go under the incorporation as the city, which is looked more favorable upon by the state than keeping 2 or even trying to merge 2. So it's just a point to consider as you guys are looking at these annexation / incorporation issues.
And obviously the sheriff, we'd like to keep we love both our fire department and our sheriff department. And how does that all play out?
Yeah, if you incorporate in the Sanibel, those 2 are obviously going to be huge issues, because if you annex in the Sanibel, because Sanibel is going to then want the PD to do it, sheriff's not going to want to take over and just keep a portion that's now annexed into the city of Sanibel. They're having those same issues with the city of Fort Myers annexing portions of Lee County as well. So I do know the county is looking at those as well. So.
Okay, so those are issues that would have to be worked through. Any other comments on annexation?
Well, it seems to me that if this were to go anywhere, the first step is you'd have to determine if Sanibel had a high degree of interest in doing this.
Yes.
For their own benefit. Would Sanibel view the annexation of Captiva as something that would be very desirable for Sanibel?
So the big part I see is that if we have our own land development codes, and we can control the amount of building, which goes back into controlling the amount of traffic in Sanibel. I think
Sanibel would look at it and say, we will have more control over what goes on with our sister island here. that would be a plus from them. I would think they would likely, from a financial point of view, it would probably be good for their overall finances
Mhm.
because they would be picking up, a new base of taxpayers.
And
Yeah.
from,
And
and some of
probably
the-
the revenues they would receive from those taxpayers would probably, I don't know this, but I would guess the new tax revenues they would receive could significantly exceed their incremental costs of having, to provide services to us.
right.
You would think, right? You would think.
Yeah.
Hey, Jay,
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
have
it
to
seems
leave.
clear to me that if this were to go anywhere, Sanibel would have to have a lot of desire to do this.
Correct. And that's why they
Yeah.
start off with the annexation process.
Right.
Right.
Jay, I'm
But
gonna leave shortly, but I
yes.
wanted to add something that was a big issue that shouldn't be overlooked, and that is rental properties. Sanibel has mostly very stringent rental rules where you have to rent for a minimum of a month, and Captiva has a lot of rental bases that are weekly rentals and above. And I think so the sticking points back then were sewer and rentals. But sewer was such a big issue that Captivans at the time were opposed to sewers. In fact, I think the constitution of the Civic Association had been changed to oppose sewers. So, because they're worried that with sewers, you can build higher. In any event,
Yes,
so that
right.
issue I think is less of an issue because Captivans have been doing all this work on the sewer project and moving in the right direction. But rentals is going to be a big issue, where these would be things that we would need as separate carve outs to be negotiated ahead of time with Sanibel.
Yeah, no, there's a whole long list of items that would have to be worked out.
Yeah.
Correct.
And
I mean, another reason is, well, with back to the 28 versus a week, the 28 days versus a week, that you could also see that some people on Sanibel might say, well, if Captiva has 7 days, shouldn't we have the same laws? How does it play out in Sanibel? So I think it goes both ways.
right.
And then you have evacuation routes, which I'm sure is an issue, and that's another reason that Sanibel may want it.
One question on
Yes,
the
Tony.
petition. If you're doing this petition and it's done by straps, so just theoretically, let's say there's 1,000 straps on Captiva. Can a person who has more than 1 or 2 or 3 straps vote and he gets 3 votes because he has 3 straps?
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Thanks, David.
But the corollary of that is there at South Seas, for example, you may have very few straps related to timbers, for example, versus some of the other associations. You have to look at the property map to see how many separate straps there are. But I don't think you can assume that the number of hotel rooms, for example, equal the same number of straps.
Thanks, David.
And wouldn't each timeshare week have a vote?
I would suspect not. I don't know that, John.
Okay.
I suspect it's by strap.
Yeah,
So-
they don't, timeshares that don't have a strap assigned to that, there's one strap for the building.
That's-
Okay.
so
Okay.
I would suspect what Ken said, yes.
And would we be then called Santiva?
I sort of like Sanibel and Captiva Islands. It's a long name, but it's pretty. But no, who knows?
Well, that will be a major consideration. What's this entity called?
Okay.
I guess we'd all say Captiva and the Big Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? Okay. I think that's about it. Anything else on annexation? Okay, next.
Oh, I'm sorry. It took me too long to unmute myself. I just have one concern as a business owner, and I don't know, maybe you all don't share my excitement, but what I really like about Captiva are like the white lights that we have around the village, and it's kind of nice and kind of magical looking in the evening and stuff. And in Sanibel, they have a strict rule. Once it's whatever amount of days after the holidays, all lights have to come down. And there are like all kinds of rules. Now, some of you might like that. I don't know. But I'm just saying is we would have to abide by everything. I don't think that we could set up our own little exceptions. But if we could set up our little exceptions, I certainly would want that one to be one of them. That's just one person here.
Yeah, well, Sandy, you're bringing up just a huge point in all this would be, how would we preserve our customs and traditions on Captiva if we were to become part, of Sanibel? Would Sanibel, insist that we become, like Sanibel? Or would they say, you have your own customs and traditions and, land use, principles and so forth. And, you would have your own separate planning district and, you could abide by that. I mean, that would just be a huge issue to work out in all of this.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. If we were to go down an incorporation route, it requires a special act from the legislature. Our delegation would need to support an incorporation. But what I am hearing is that the state is not inclined to add any more cities. They think we've got enough cities in Florida and they really don't want any more. This was from the guy who helped us 20 years ago and was the one who was the consultant who helped get the last city through the legislature.
Is this that Joe Mankiewicz or whatever his name is? Or
yes, that's Joe.
Okay.
It would start off with a feasibility study. We did that last time.
Sandy, hold on a second. But if we incorporate, it requires an act of the state legislature to approve it?
Yes.
Okay. Whereas annexation does not.
Correct.
Okay.
Annexation is all sort of local decisions being made.
Okay.
Okay. And so with incorporation, you have to do a feasibility study. You typically hire a consultant to do this to make sure that, and it has all the financials and other issues that might, to be able to show that we could do it. We don't have to vote. There are standards, relevant standards from the legislature that it needs to be a compact, contiguous, and amenable to separate government area.
Now, wait a minute, Sandy, you're saying we could incorporate without having Sanibel property owners be in favor of it? Or Captiva property owners be in favor of it?
It says the vote is not required.
Typically, the delegation of legislation or the delegation would like to see a vote from the community before they proceed, but it's not required by law.
Yeah.
Okay, but can we imagine that we would incorporate some measure to assure that a majority of property owners were in favor of it?
The only thing I can imagine is us working with the community to figure out what the community wants and going down that path. That's the only thing I can imagine.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine us proceeding on incorporation without, a majority of property owners. I'm not sure how you would determine that, but you would sure think you'd want a majority of property owners to be supportive of it before we would follow this.
Yeah, we could get straw polls to begin with to start understanding what people want.
Okay.
Okay, but specific vote is not required. And so there's some other relevant standards. You have to be 2 miles away from another city, which would be Sanibel. That could be waived, and we have to have a proposed municipal charter, which we could do. Some issues are that might not help us in terms of restoring our own land use policies because of the recent act in the legislature. We could be a new city and therefore we'd have to adopt what the state rules were. Yeah, so that didn't work. Do we have enough residents who want to do the work? It's going to take people to run a municipal government. And so you need city council and a planning board, and how many people want to get involved and do that work? I don't know. The timeline is probably 20+ months due to the legislature schedules. We're too late for this session probably, so we'd have to wait for next year. And the cost is at least $70,000 to do the feasibility study. Then you probably have to hire some lobbyists and other people to help you get this done.
Linda, can we go back to your first issue bullet point? May not allow Captiva to restore its own land use policies.
Right. We would be a new city, right? New
Okay,
cities would have to probably adopt the state land use policies.
well then what would we be accomplishing by this? We want our own land use.
Good question.
Linda, what do you mean by state land use policies? I have no
I'm
idea.
probably misspeaking, but my understanding is that the state will not allow us. My understanding is the state, I think we'd end up under the county land use policies. But that we could not adopt any more restrictive policies than the county and the land and the state have. Am I misspeaking here?
The way to think about this is that if you incorporated, you would become a city and you would be able to develop your own land use policies and your own land use policies, your own land development code. And so technically you could have exactly what we have now. But the problem will arise is if the county permitted greater development or greater density as they currently in the process of doing. And then we came in and incorporated, and then we wanted to make our policies more restrictive than the county had. Then you would be in a situation of removing certain existing property rights that people on Captiva or property owners on Captiva had by way of the county land development code. And then you have questions of whether that's a taking or interfering with existing property rights of owners. So I think the way that this is to be understood is that, yes, if you incorporated, you could have your own land development code, but if there were less restrictive regulations that were already in place, it might be difficult to go back in time. And I think that's what this sentence may mean.
That's
If
what
it
I was
means
trying.
that, then this accomplishes nothing for us, does it?
Well, I'm not saying, I will just tell you that that what I think is being proposed by incorporation is not necessarily that you could undo what the county has already passed, but you might be able to prevent any future changes that would be even would even create greater opportunity for development. So the answer to your question, Jay, you might not be able to undo what the county just did on September 6th and September 5th, but you could then control your land use policies going forward to prevent greater development than was already approved.
Hey, David, wouldn't we have the same issues even with annexation to Sanibel? Wouldn't you have that same issue? Or I believe their building heights are the same as what the the county just approved, correct?
I'm not sure about that, and I don't think it's the same in all places. So I just don't know, Jeff.
I
But
thought we could have,
I think if that you were going to have annexation with Sanibel, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm taking a position on any of this, but if you had annexation with Sanibel, I think the first discussion that would take place is that the property owners on Captiva would want to have their own existing land development code that exists now. But in answer to your question, if the county passed and finally approved the plan amendments, could we go back even with annexation of with Sanibel and undo those? I think that raises the question of takings and the Burt Harris legislation. So the answer is whether it be annexation or incorporation, you still have the problem of what the county has already provided and granted to property owners. And it may be very difficult to undo some of that. But I don't know the answer, but it's definitely an issue that one would have to investigate. The real value of annexation, incorporation, conservation district, any other of these alternatives that are being proposed is that it would allow you to control development going forward, future development, rather than what happened on September 5th and September 6th.
This is Ken. It doesn't make sense to me to discuss incorporation in any detail at all unless we can determine if in fact the legislature is totally against creating new cities. And once if we determine that they are negative on that, Linda, that this is a conversation that is wasting everybody's time.
just giving you the facts, just giving.
I know,
Okay.
I know, but should we,
So the probability.
Linda, should we consider this at all, or should we retain some individual to
From my,
temperature of
Hey,
the
Ken?
legislature?
my
Yeah.
opinion,
And I think we're just at a stage right now where we're just trying to get some, top line understanding of what our various alternatives are.
I understand that, but when I read this, Jay, when Ken sent it out, it just seems obvious that although this is a possibility, it's a kind of remote, and if we want to pursue it any farther, we should determine if it's feasible.
so-
Yeah, I know, but I think your question is a valid one, but I think it comes at the end of Linda's, review here.
walk through all this.
Okay, then, Linda, I apologize, and I
No,
was
no,
inserted
no,
at the end.
No, it's
I was
okay.
inserted at the end of this
No, I
conversation.
mean, okay, so the story is that, this is the story Joe told me, and he's the one who is the expert, and he said, the legislature says, why do we need another city?
Well,
From my
I've
point of view, that makes
I've
it,
heard that.
okay, another thing is, who's gonna serve on all of this? Do we really have enough people to do it? There's a lot of issues, but there's a lot of issues with everything, so it's
Well,
all,
I think we're at a stage here where we're just trying to review the options.
right,
And after we reviewed it, we have a discussion of, do we think any of these are worth pursuing?
correct. So this is giving you a high level view of what it could be. Okay, let's go to the next one. Option 3. So this one came from Carrie Schumann, and we then looked in detail at it. We've got people from SCCF who have investigated this more online, who can help if we have more questions. So in 72, there was a Florida Environmental Land and Water Management Act. Briefly, the intent was to protect resources and public facilities within designated geographic areas from uncontrolled development that would cause substantial deterioration of such resources. The Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, FDEO, reviews all the local development projects in these areas, and they can appeal for projects that are inconsistent with state and local plans and regulations. Typically, the areas of critical state concern that are relevant to us are environmental or natural resources areas or historical or archaeological districts. To date, there have been 5 that have been formed. Big Cypress, Green Swamp, the city of Key West and some of the Keys, I don't know how to even pronounce it, Apalachicola Bay Area, and recently in 2023, the Brevard Barrier Island area. So next slide, please. Ken. So looking at the 2003 bill, its intent was to establish a land use management system that protects the natural environment and promotes the orderly and balanced growth in accordance with the capacity of public facilities and services. It is to protect the Indian River Lagoon ecosystem and ensure safe evacuation. So those seem similar to some of our concerns. Again, the timetable, because this would need to be a legislative bill, it would take about 18 months. It would cost for a lot. We would have to pay for the lobbyist and the consultant to accomplish this. Now, does anyone want to add anything more about this? This is a new alternative. Perhaps
This argues that Captiva is
a critical state-controlled area that should be controlled by the state because of our unique natural environment that needs to be protected. And we have natural areas in our ecosystem that need to be protected. That's what it argues.
But didn't I read somewhere else that this has to be of statewide concern or
well, Key West is statewide concern. It depends if you believe Sanibel and the intent here would be a area thing that we would do with Sanibel, and perhaps for part of Pine Island Sound, it wouldn't be a Captiva only thing.
It usually needs to be regional, Jay. If you look at the ones that came in the past, Big Cypress was to control development in the swamp. The Green Swamp area was groundwater. They were very concerned with septic intrusion. Key West and the Florida Keys was also groundwater and water quality. Apalachicola Bay, mostly water quality again, and the unique environment there for oysters. And then Brevard was tied to both the barrier islands, which is the evacuation, and then the Indian River Lagoon, which is the Lake Okeechobee outflow.
well,
So
are you in control of your development if you do this? I mean, does this mean if somebody wants to tear down and build a house, this will never happen? Or
No.
do we know?
You would still have local rules, but they would be reviewed by the state to be in accordance with whatever your act had stated your concerns were.
So you do get the state review. It means we could have separate, separate planning. We could have separate land use policies. We don't know a lot about this,
Yeah.
Jay.
Right.
Okay, and it
Okay.
recently happened, but it seems to be a possibility of a different way to go where our whole area is put under some protection from a natural environment point of view, and especially since we've got our water issues on Pine Island Sound, that maybe it's relevant, maybe it's not. It depends what people want to do.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay,
it seems to me that this option is problematic in that we're trading. If you think about annexation to Sanibel, I think the concern of the community is going to be around, are we going to be subject to their policies and can we sort of carve out and manage ourselves? This one, it seems like we're jumping into the state level of bureaucracy, and self-governance could be more limited, possibly.
Yeah, I agree with your comment there, Bruce.
Yeah.
okay. Let's keep going. So let's say that we choose to do nothing. There's three possibilities here. This county does get overruled, and we may get our land use rules restored or modified based upon the state concerns. Well, that would be good. We may have, though, ongoing vulnerability due to the lack of local control. Next, the county approval stands, but we negotiate with Timbers, so we get some compromises on intensity and density. Or finally, the county approval stand and Timbers seeks maximum density in building heights. All have different implications. Okay. Next. And finally, these are some other variations. There's special districts defined by the Florida statutes. One example happens to be CEPD. They don't allow any control over land use and development, so it's really not relevant for us. There's also community development districts. Those are used to develop raw land and allow taxation early in the development process. All property owners must agree and the county has to approve. So that's probably not relevant to us. And then there's the Gasparilla Island Conservation District Act of 1980. There was only one of these. It may have happened because the island is under two separate counties, but it controls the development in terms of building heights, density, historical structures, land use, and zoning. It would require legislation for us to be a conservation district. This is a one-off as far as we know, that it happened once and no one else has ever done that.
Linda, let me just say something about that. The reason I'm going to say something is because I've received a couple of calls about this already. That there are some people on Captiva and some people on Sanibel who actually think this is worth taking a look at. The conservation district of Boca Grande basically is a 4 or 5 page document that incorporates density, building heights into a piece of state legislation that actually one could very easily imagine the key points of our land development code that applies to Captiva being incorporated into a document like this, and then would be a part of state legislation, could not be changed by the county or anybody else unless the state legislature amended it. And so obviously you would have to have the legislators at the state level approving it and taking the lead on it and doing it in conjunction with us. But I would tell you it's a very simple process if you have the support, because you just draft up our existing code pretty much incorporated into a 5 page document, and that would be the guardrails that would guide Captiva's development in the future. I have no idea whether it's possible or whether it's still possible or whether it's runoff or there may be some other examples of this. But I just, based on the phone calls I've received, I wouldn't just dismiss it at this point, and I would take it seriously as a possible option. And it might be worth talking to one or two of our state legislators to see if there's any interest in doing something like that.
Okay, that requires legislative approval. Is that correct, Florida legislature?
It'd be equivalent to passing a piece of legislation. It's passing a law.
And that law says that, well, could this undo what's been done?
Again, it raises the same taking issues. But it depends what it means to have been done. So for example, I don't know how it's going to play out with the county going forward, or how quickly the amendments get passed, or whether the land development code changes will withstand judicial inquiry. We don't know if and when Timbers is going to submit a plan development. So the question is, if they don't have a plan development approved already, can you then revert back to the old code because you're not taking anything away from them? So these are all legal questions that one would have to take a look at, whether you had a conservation district, whether you had an annexation, whether you had incorporation, or even if you just intervened in their plan development project. So I just don't know the answer to that, Jay, but timing is everything. So it would depend on when the rights that a property owner would have under the new code, when would those rights vest? Yeah, in other words, do they vest only when they get passed, or do they vest when you have an application? I just don't know the answer to it. So this is something one would have to examine going forward.
Okay, but on the Gasparilla Island one,
Yeah.
what we're saying that for reasons of need to preserve, our island as it is due to its fragile nature, the legislature is going to pass some act.
Yeah, the bill starts with an act relating to Gasparilla Island, that said islands are a fragile barrier island of particular natural beauty, containing abundant plant, marine, animal, and bird life. And therefore, we require the creation of a Gasparilla Island Conservation District, restricting the density of dwelling units, restricting commercial development, restricting the height limitations on all buildings and structures, etc., prohibiting exterior advertising signs. This exception is needed and is more restrictive than other regulations on the county, and is required to protect basically this barrier island. That's what it says. And then it goes on to lay out what the density requirements are, what the height restrictions are, what can be built, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, if there were legislators interested in doing this on behalf of the Captiva community, you would have to work out what would be included in that with respect to density and height. And I don't know if you need sign limitations, because that's not been a serious problem for us, but there may be other things you want in there, and you'd have to work that out and decide what the priorities are to memorialize in a piece of state legislation, assuming it's even possible. The only reason I'm raising it a little more than just other variations is because I received a call about interest in this. That's all, and I just wanted to relate that.
Yeah, well, it's if it's something that you could actually do, it definitely, has appeal.
It certainly has appeal.
Mm-hmm. I just don't know how to develop it further. I could certainly go to, say, Adam Botana and say, would you be interested in, supporting something like this? But I'm not 100% sure what we're asking for.
Well,
I think we need to work that out a little bit.
Okay. Okay, Linda, do you have other comments?
Okay, so now the question is, what do we do next, basically? I've heard, suggestions that we develop some of these in more detail. I've heard we have a community meeting and present them to the community, and we could do an interactive community meeting where we can do polling during the meeting and hear people's comments and thoughts. Those are the two big ideas.
Well,
Or they're both. We have different teams say this is how this would work and what they would think.
okay, well, we've got a problem in, resources.
Mhm.
Who do we have that's knowledgeable enough to pursue these things? In more detail. We've got an issue with that.
Mhm. Because I think we accomplished what we wanted to today, in that we gave everybody sort of an overview.
Yeah, sort of an idea what some alternatives are. Well, maybe right now we just open it, for discussion.
And I think that would be great.
Does anybody have any feelings on which of these? Well, let me set up the status quo option. I mean, what we could do is, we've got the legal challenges underway now. We could continue to monitor this, for a few more months, see what happens, to the legal challenges. And then, pick this up again. After that would be one option. Or we could start pursuing in more detail, one or more of these options. So let me just open it up to discussion from the panel. Who wants to speak up as to which of these options seem to have merit, or should we just let things percolate for a while longer before we start, moving on any of these?
Jay, I think I like what you just said. I would go that route. I think it would be nice to know what Timbers, when Dave started, it would be nice to know what Timbers is interested in doing. Because these other options, I like the Gasparilla option, that's worth looking into. But I feel, annexing, incorporating, I don't see how incorporating would work. But it just seems, are we going for something that can be worse than what we have?
Yeah.
So I'd like to see what's playing out right now. We could always, 2 months, I don't think is going to make a big difference.
So you're kind of the camp of
wait and see.
Let things percolate a while and come back to this, or?
That's where I am. Yep.
Yeah. Other views.
I'm going to take the opposite view, John. I think the county is, according to David and Jay, has made it clear that they don't consider Captiva's role from the Captiva Community Panel of any value anymore. If I'm not saying that, I didn't paraphrase that how you gentlemen said it, but
I know what you're saying, Ken.
Yeah. Your point. The way to, I don't think that we're going to know very much in 2 months, to tell you the truth, because I think this is going to drag much longer than 2 months. I think Linda's presented 2 options that we should pursue, and I liked David's comment about Gasparilla, and I like the comment about the perhaps the barrier island being protected. Linda, I forget what that number was, what it was called.
3.
But I think you have two options that we could start investigating, Jay.
Okay, you're saying trying to form some kind of a special district that, you know, would protect development on the island,
Yes.
not annexation or municipality or
I go along with John there. I think we jump from one regulation to another regulation, and we might not like what we jump to. But it appears it's a couple good options out there. And David apparently has some interesting telephone calls. You may not be, David, comfortable with describing any more in detail what those calls were, but I find it very interesting.
Well, I think my problem with those is that, you know, I just don't know if they're doable. We hardly know anything about them at all, but we could certainly try to figure out.
Yes, that's my point,
more
Jay.
information about them.
Is this viable? Is it feasible? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Others.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm all for getting some more information on those other options, but because I don't just know enough about them. But I also think it's worth having a high level discussion with Sanibel about whether there's any appetite on their part to explore it, because if they say no, then that's
that one's dead,
either,
right?
So
yeah, well, Bruce, I think I could certainly I think start a process with Sanibel where we can start learning about what their degree of interest would be in annexation.
Yeah, and I think, and you know, for us it would be around. I think for the community is, hey, you know, we would want some sort of self-regulation.
Right, exactly.
Like we don't want to sign up for their land code and all that stuff. And they may, you know, given their level of concern around how this process is played out, you know, hopefully they'll be receptive to that, because maybe it's not in line with what their code is, but it's better than maybe what the options could be if it plays out. So I think just having a general, hey, is this something, if we were to just take this to the community and decide it's something that we're going to look at, are you guys interested in looking at it as well? And because if they say no, then we can cross that one off the list too.
Right. I think, you know, I could probably, you know, start a dialogue with Sanibel and see what their level of interest in annexation is. I think for annexation to go anywhere, I think Sanibel would have to, you know, really be behind it and really want it to happen for that option to be successful. And we don't know what their current thinking is on that now.
Correct.
What I hear, what I hear when we talk about annexation is we want the protection from Sanibel, but then we have all these requests. We want, in a way, we really like our Captiva Community Plan. It has served us very well. It has served everyone well. The businesses, the people that live here, the people that come here to visit. But our plan was not firm enough to allow a group to come in and make it possible to get amendments implemented that we don't want. When I hear annexation, to me it sounds like, Sanibel, we need you because we need help to protect ourselves from amendments like that. But at the same time, we have a lot of different ideas than Sanibel had for their idea. And
absolutely,
I really, really like the idea of the Gasparilla conservation plan. It seems to be like the Captiva Community plan, but stronger, where it cannot be as easily changed. And especially, yeah, I think what we really want is we want our plan, and we need it stronger. And yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Marguerite, and I agree with it.
Jay, a couple things. From my point of view, the plans, it'd be interesting, and I might be in the minority here because I'm a property owner, but I don't vote. And I'm wondering, when we go to different options, is it property owners or is it voters? You know, those are two little distinguishing factors. I'm not sure which goes on which other side. The other point, you know, where this whole thing came about, as I understand it, I mean, obviously because of timbers and the fear of their development. And David, I have never seen their plan or anything else. And my question is, I'll be honest with you, you know, I could say it if Timbers was here. I don't trust him. Okay, first of all, let me make that really clear. So if we were to talk to Timbers and say, where is there compromise here? Is there a possibility of compromise in terms of height? You know, in my opinion, because I'm dealing with it here on Sanibel, I think there's maybe some negotiation in height, maybe, looking at where we have Land's End and the height of Land's End, possibly. But in terms of density, I'm dead set against it. I mean, I'll be very clear about that. So again, I don't know if anybody sat down with Timbers in a neutral area and say, look, we're okay with you guys, you know, going more than the regulated height. But if we agree to all this, then we're going to lock it down very, very tight where we don't have this issue. Just some thoughts. That's all I'm giving you guys. Okay, that's it.
So you're saying a next step is to try to establish a dialogue with Timbers?
If there
See
is
if
a
we can learn what they
possibility,
want to do and.
well, I'd certainly want to know. I mean, I'm not in favor of some of the stuff they proposed in terms of height, but you know, is it where you go ask for the sky and you settle for something less? I don't know. What is the overall height of Land's End? If they were to build buildings at the same heights of those, is that objectionable? I don't know. I have never talked to Timbers. I don't have, I'm just looking at as a hoteler, I get what they want with this density thing in the hotel rooms. That's where the money is. Come on, be honest. So I'm very against of them going over the 247 limit that they were authorized by. I'm dead set against that. Let me make that really clear. And not because I'm worried about competing hotelers. It's more because of the density issue. And I do have a flavor for the people living in that area. All of a sudden there's going to be unlimited units. Come on, that's crazy. But the height thing, I'm just opening it up. Again, if you were to sit down, you know, is there an area of agreement there? But certainly there's a disagreement in density. So I just wanted to get that on the table. That's all.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that a little bit, Jay. If this would have been done correctly, in other words, if we would have had a plan from the beginning, and then we would see what amendments we needed or variances or deviations, then you could sit down. If they would have come to the panel like Blackstone did in the past, we would have had the ability to negotiate. At this point, my understanding is that Timbers wants increased density. And height and density are obviously interrelated, because if you have land, if you want increased density, you got to go higher. And I know that they've been pretty consistent about increasing density for hotel rooms. And I know that it has not been received favorably by the associations on South Seas for the reasons you say. I think as we go through this legal process, if we have legitimate legal claims that are going to extend the length of time for this whole thing to play out, and if we intervene, if they make a plan development, apply, and we intervene, and it takes a long time with all the studies we have to do on evacuation, et cetera, et cetera. It is my hope that there may be a way that we can negotiate something that is acceptable. It was always my hope that we could then put in some limits in the plan rather than have it unlimited as it now is. But I just don't know if any of that is possible. And so it's very difficult to assess. You have a legitimate concern and question, and it would be nice if we could all come to an agreement that doesn't seriously violate our code and also protects our fragile barrier island. I just have no way of knowing. And trust is in rare supply right now, because as bad as the changes in the code and plan have been, what's worse is that the county failed to recognize the special needs of a barrier island. And they put development and they put consistency across all of Lee County, one size fits all, above the needs of Captiva. And that's what was so disappointing. And I've heard now, Tony, repeatedly that there's very little appreciation of community planning panels in Lee County any longer. And that's the biggest concern.
Yeah, thanks. You answered everything that I, kind of concerned. I just wanted to put that on the table, and your explanation is spot on. Thanks, David.
Right. And so maybe things will change. Maybe there'll be a new appreciation of community planning panels and our panel because of the overwhelming community support we've received in opposing this stuff. So I don't think there's a downside to letting this play out a little bit.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks,
There are a
David.
couple of comments from the audience, which I can run through now. We were discussing the alternatives of annexation, incorporation, et cetera, to Captiva. Is this a discussion solely predicated on the change to the development code versus the true benefits to Captiva? Asked differently, is the tail wagging the dog? Next one is there any indication that Sanibel is open to this, which we've discussed? Next one, isn't there power in numbers? Annexation seems to benefit more people directly. And finally, there is a vote for annexation or to be being considered keeping all of our rules, and they're nominating Tony because he has hotels in both places.
Say that one again.
Someone who supports annexation into Sanibel, but keeping all of our rules, and they nominate Tony to handle the negotiations because he has feet in both islands.
Okay.
So I would like to speak about the tail wagging the dog a little bit. As someone who's tried to get grants and money for Captiva, and continually run up into things which, if you're not a municipality, you can't get the money, or you're not the county, you can't get the money. It's very difficult not being self-governed. And it means that we will always be wanting, if we stay with unincorporated or unannexed, it means that whatever the priorities of the county will become ours in terms of funding. Lately, we've been very successful in the CEPD, which is a legal entity and can get funding. We've gotten a lot of money through the help of Commissioner Ruane and others. But trying to get any of these things going and getting grants from the state, we get thrown out immediately because we're not a municipality or some kind of organization. So I don't see our panel, especially with Captiva, I mean the county not wanting to have panels, I don't see we are in a sustainable mode of self-governance unless, or any kind of governance, we will be getting what the county wants or what somebody else wants, basically. So that's why I even in our recovery, David working with the county and Bob Walters did a tremendous job. That was based on personalities and people getting along. What happens next time? and if we're just not the priority, what happens to us? So I think we need some more sustainable mode of governance, be it, I don't know what it could be, the annexation, the conservation district with Gasparilla will take care of our biggest problems. But I think we need something locally, and I'm not sure how else to get it. That's my opinion.
Okay. Other comments from panel members?
We did get another comment from the audience.
Yeah.
Who says, I believe annexation is out for most Captivans due to losing our separate fire district for that reason alone. The writer agrees with Marguerite and Ken that we continue to research the two new options side by side to evaluate benefits comparatively. The conservation district may have other benefits relative to funding for resiliency efforts.
Okay. Any other comments from people watching?
Jay, I
Yes,
wonder,
Ann.
one of the comments that Linda and her and Ken in the presentation said something about a straw poll. And I wonder, maybe it's too soon, but does it make any sense before work starts on, these different opportunities or options, that we get a sense of what the community is interested in? I mean, understanding that, so many people, voted against or had a strong opinion against the current council, land development code. But all of this is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of people's times. I'm sure it's already taken a lot of David's time. And so do we want to have a sense of what the community wants and would vote for?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I've given that some thought, and my concern with doing a straw poll right now is, do we know enough about the alternatives to do a straw poll?
Yeah.
Now. For example, let's say you do a straw poll and one of the options is simply annex with Sanibel. Okay. If you just say annex with Sanibel, you're going to, I think, get a lot of, negative vote. But if you say annex with Sanibel with an agreement that Sanibel will honor the Captiva plan, you might get, a different level of interest.
Yeah. So it sounds like some of the most viable options we need to get more information. So
yeah, you could make a case that they need to be developed a little further before you could have a meaningful straw poll. In regards to the, let's call it the special district option, I don't know how we would even present that to people right now, what that means.
Mhm.
The idea of, the state says is going to set some rules that, prohibit development on Captiva because, we're a fragile barrier island. I don't know if we know enough for people to,
Mhm.
I know right now, I don't know enough about that option to evaluate. I think it needs
Yeah.
to be developed further. So that's my thought on that, Ann. But I think a straw poll early in the process is something that we really do need to do before we get down the line here.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, well, let's discuss some next steps. I can certainly try to open a dialogue with Sanibel to try to gauge, what their level of interest in annexation, might be. And, whether or not they would be receptive to annexation in such a way that the current Captiva plan, would be honored. I mean, I could try to at least see if Sanibel's interested in this before we, would spend more time on that. So I know I could do that. It seems the other thing we have to do is we have to put more meat on this special district option. I don't know what that means. And I don't know how to go about further developing, that. I think it's something that has not been done since 1980. So I don't know, Ken, you said that, right? The last time something like that was done was 1980.
Yes.
So I mean, it sounds very attractive, but how can we learn more about that? Does anybody have any ideas?
You would probably want to contact some of your local delegation and find out if they'd be interested in even sponsoring this. Because if they won't take it up to Tallahassee, it won't go anywhere.
Okay, well, I could certainly meet with Adam Botana, but I don't know if I know to see if he would be interested in that. But I don't know enough I'm not even sure what I'm asking.
I could talk to you about that, Jay. I think what you'd be asking for fundamentally is incorporating our existing land development code and plan into a piece of state legislation that would then preclude local governments and the county from making the kinds of changes they just made. That's what the gas.
So you think you could draft something up what this means, or at least educate me enough to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, Dave, you said there was a 5-page document. Are you able to send that out?
I will have, yeah, it can be sent out, absolutely. Yep.
I guess, okay.
I just wonder if with something like this, if the county commissioners would be against it, and if there would then be some lobbying on their part, and then say everything went through and then the governor vetoed it. I mean, are there those possibilities that it could just be shut down because it's not in favor by Lee County? It's not favored by.
Good question.
Yeah, yes. The answer is yes.
Well, that seems like it's a real possibility then.
You would have to retain, if you wanted to go the state legislative route, and you would make contact with your delegation. You would also hire a lobbyist who would work the system and could make a determination of where the governor would stand on this. One can't assume that Lee County and the governor see eye to eye on everything. I think that's an assumption that should not be made at this point. They may agree on a lot of things, but they don't necessarily agree on everything. And so I think you would, like any other piece of legislation you would want to pass, you would work the legislative delegations and you would hire or retain a lobbyist to get the thing passed, like any other piece of any other law. And that's how it would be done. And yes, the people who were opposed to it would do this. They would oppose it. They would reach out to the delegation. They would reach out to the governor's office, et cetera, and it would be a fight to the state house.
The CEPD has a lobbyist who has been very effective. If there's something we want to find out about moods in Tallahassee or anything, we could ask him to find out. He's connected to Botana's office, and I think our senator's office as well.
Well, that's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think if I had a clear understanding of what we're asking for, I think I could certainly meet with Botana and see if he has any interest in this.
Jay, I think you should.
Okay, so
if we just, I mean, and then I think if we decide to go this way, then we just need to do a full force push through the governor's office.
Yeah, right.
Well, just Jeff Powell just wrote, the county would definitely be against annexation. They are in the process of a charter review on the county
Right.
level that also pertains to annexations.
Yes, that's true.
What that's
Do you have
about,
any idea
is-
where that stands right now and the probability of that going through?
it's in front of the Charter Review Commission, and the city attorneys have all spoken out against it. If it is recommended by the Charter Review Commission, it has to go to the voters for approval. And what that's being driven
Which
by,
voters? Which voters?
Lee County. And what it's being driven by particularly is the annexations. The city of Fort Myers has been undertaking, particularly along Tree Line Drive, where they're picking up county properties. And there's been discussion that the county's provided all this infrastructure and the city's just swooping in to take it. So Pendergrass says he wants to get better coordination of annexations so that this provision of services is a little clearer. But that if it were to be approved, it would require any annexation be approved by the county commission.
Do we know when this might happen?
Depends, it would probably be the next general election if their timing is as it usually is, but right now they don't have a schedule in place. They're still talking about it.
Okay, so would that election then be the soonest it could happen would be a year from this November?
Probably, unless they decide to try to do it in one of the primaries, which they sometimes do if the ballot gets too full.
Okay, well, let me see if I can summarize our next steps here. All right, one, we're going to continue to monitor what happens with our legal challenges. Two, I'm going to try to start a dialogue with Sanibel to determine what level of interest they have in annexation. Three, David and I are going to work together to try to describe in more concrete terms what the special district option is. And then I will try to meet with Botana to see if he has any interest in pursuing this with us.
When you talk to Sanibel, would it be appropriate to talk about the fire department and the sheriff, and that could we get some interlocal agreement or some kind of agreement that would allow us to keep our fire department?
I guess I could, but I think the main thing is just, do they have enough interest in this to start pursuing it?
Okay, and then it becomes a secondary issue.
Yeah, I kind of think so.
Okay.
Hey, Linda, Jay, it's Jeff again with the fire
Yes.
district.
Yeah.
I did text our attorney, who also happens to be a lobbyist with the state and everything. I think some of you have met her, Laura Donaldson. She said if that was one of the things you tried, whether it was incorporation or annexation, she said specifically on the annexation issues, you could ask Sanibel under that provision to carve out public safety from Sanibel and keep things status quo under a long-term agreement of statute.
Okay, well, that's obviously that's what, well.
Yeah, I mean, I to the extent I can, I mean, I would, try to communicate to Sanibel that if they did have interest in it, that, we would, want them to try to govern us according to the Captiva plan versus the Sanibel plan.
Right. But I think Jeff just answered the question that this is feasible, that we could keep our own safety.
Fire department,
Fire department and sheriff department. I think we'd all like that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I think
you
some
know-
of those would have to be mentioned up front because otherwise they can't really saying whether they be on board or not. They, they don't want to say, yeah, we're on board. And then down the line, all of a sudden, as a community, you guys are like, oh, and by the way, we want this, this, and this. And then you spend a bunch of time and effort, trying to go.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Jeff, but at this point, I just think, we don't know if Sanibel's interested in annexation.
Right.
They may well say, we're completely consumed by all the issues with Ian. We've got too much on our plate now. Annexation, would be a lot of work, and we just don't think we want to take it up now. I don't know what they would say, but I just think before we go down that route, you got to have some understanding of whether or not Sanibel has significant interest in pursuing it.
Yep.
Okay, any more discussion on this topic before we take a 5-minute break and then try to work through the remainder of the agenda? Okay, excellent discussion. Thank you, panel. Let's reconvene in 5 minutes.
Hey, John. Love your backdrop, John. You look like you're a judge or something.
Oh, man. That's far from it. Oh, a lot of books. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Songwriters was pretty good. I had to leave Saturday morning, but I was here for Friday. It was great weather that looks like they had through the whole thing. So that was kind of good, stuff like that. So
yeah.
Anyways.
Good crowd up at Twin Waters.
Yeah, every place. I heard the Village was good too, that Sandy and the other operations of it, Green Flash, everybody sort of helped out that weekend. So it was good to see, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good thing they put together and they really promote it,
Yeah, they do. The VCB. Interesting. Did you see, I don't know if you get the chamber newsletter that the president CEO of Visit Florida is going to be at the next luncheon over at Pink Shell, which would be interesting. Trouble is they give the statistics for all of Florida and it really doesn't reflect what's going on in the islands, but that's okay. It's good information. So
yeah, it's still quiet, but I go, well, this was always the slowest time of the year.
Yeah, unless I had Oktoberfest going on, but we don't do that at all.
Yeah, in the holiday village,
Yeah, that's right. All that. Yeah. So
yeah.
we'll see what happens, but we're going full bore.
How's Doug doing?
He's doing good. Do you like the new look of the building going down the street?
Absolutely.
Came out nice. Yeah. Big improvement. We're going to finish the Palmetto building, the Bayside, next week. And then all that's left is the tennis courts. I think the 26th of October, they'll be setting the slabs up on top of the beams that they poured the other, 3 weeks ago. And then they got to put a topping on that and then just dress it up. But once the beams are solid, then they can take all that scaffolding out and scrape it out. And we'll be able to use that parking to help with the Thanksgiving Day push. So should be good.
Yeah. All right, man. Looking forward.
We're doing some remodel on our sewer plant because I figure it's going to be it was funny. I got to get a new filter tank built, which is probably, a $7,000 job. And he said, you want it in stainless steel? I said, hell no. I said, this one lasted 20 years. Don't worry about the next one. Hopefully by then, maybe we'll be on sewer.
We're getting by. We're just doing,
doing what you got to.
like there won't be sewers, but we're watching it, you know? 'cause
Yeah, you got, well, my plant now is 23 years, 22 years old. And, you know, it needs structural repair, just like a new roof or something. So we're upgrading, not upgrading, but just bringing it back to where we want the standard. You know,
Yeah.
stuff rusts.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Do you like water solutions? Are
Yeah,
you-
we use them.
Yeah.
We use them, but then we have contractors. I went to Bob Dean and had him come out, and we're rebuilding the filter box, which is a pretty big deal. I got to bring a crane in for a day to set that and do a
Yeah,
couple of things, but we'll get it done. You know,
good, good.
probably won't set the filter till around that second week in December when it's a little slow. So
Yeah, good, good. Yeah.
what, Jay? You got a rotator cuff or something?
Yeah, I had surgery a week ago, Thursday.
Was it a torn rotator cuff?
No, it's I had ligaments that were had tears in them that attached to my rotator cuff.
Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
what it
so-
is. Yeah.
So I don't know, they're telling me I gotta wear this sling for like 6 weeks.
Oh, yeah. You do the exercises, the little swirls and
Yeah,
stuff.
I don't know about that yet. I've got physical therapy is supposed to start the end of this week. I've got a post-op appointment tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're gonna take the
When I had mine, it's kind of like you sleep in the recliner. I figure, well, it's kind of like
Yeah, right.
flying from Boston to London or something, because you don't sleep really great, but you can't sleep in a bed because you can't roll
Well,
over.
I tried sleeping in a recliner and that didn't
Sure.
seem to work, but I seem to be able to sleep in my bed on my back.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's a pain, but this too will pass. All right, we've probably done our 5 minutes. Let's see. All right. Okay, I guess first item would be Sheriff's Office update from Mike Zawicki. Mike, are you around?
I don't see anybody from the sheriff's office on the call.
Okay, let's move on to Jeff Powell. Jeff, anything from the fire district?
Yeah, good morning, Jay. Good morning, everybody. Not a whole lot to add. We're already at 11:30 on this meeting, so I'll keep it short. Just I know you guys sent out the announcement, basically both on behalf of myself and the CEPD, that we were awarded the money from the state due to some lost revenue. So that was good to see. We were excited about that. We were able to lower our budget as well from, I know a few months ago in Caldwell, property appraiser Caldwell attended the meeting and had those conversations. So we're able to kind of bring that down quite a bit too. So it was good for us, and appreciate the support from the state on that.
That's good.
But if anybody has any questions, I can just field those. Otherwise, I'll let you guys get back to your meeting.
Hey, Jeff, I got one.
Yeah,
You know,
go ahead.
we're looking at our crosswalks, and
Huh?
we're thinking of, do you have any objections if we did like Sanibel does? You have those little stop things in the middle of the road. Do you have any objection to that?
Yeah, no, I don't. I know we talked about that before, Tony. I don't have any issues with that. Anything that slows traffic down and brings greater awareness to people crossing the street, I'm on board with.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to see, and I don't know if I should do it, Jay, or to go to DOT, that old arm that fell down or whatever, that was the radar control, to show your speed. That fell over. It's been there since forever. And I don't know whether to pick it up and throw it out, or does DOT want to come and get it? Do you want me to reach out to DOT? And
Yeah,
see
if
I
you
can get
anything you can keep off my to-do list.
Sure. I just want you guys to know what I'm doing,
Okay.
So I like them to, and I think if we put those stop signs in the middle of the road, it will be just as effective, if not more effective.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll pursue it.
Thank you. Okay, CEPD.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Daniel
Dan.
Mott. I just have a few items to bring to the attention. First thing that we, yesterday's board meeting, we announced or appointed a new commissioner, John Wade. We're excited to have him on board, and we now have 5 commissioners once again. Second item is the CEPD's Coastal Resiliency RFQ project is out to bid. We have a bid deadline date of October 25th, and with the current timeline, we're anticipating the CEPD board to select the winning bid at the November board meeting. The project is largely funded by a legislative appropriations grant of $400,000. The next item is that we are moving.
What about paying for the beach renourishment? Do you have the money to do it, or?
I'm
Just
getting
wait.
there.
Just wait, Jay.
Okay.
Okay, so the other, the next item is that we are moving towards a full island beach nourishment. We have already secured over $13 million from the FDEP, and we have additional funding requests still under review with FEMA and Lee County. Yesterday, we accepted Aptum's proposal for pre-construction services with the target of placing the beach nourishment out to bid by the first week of January, and the intention of having the construction complete before hurricane season begins next year. Make sure everybody has their protections in place. $13 million is our floor for funding right now. I anticipate more. I'd anticipate the project likely will cost around 18 million, but that's pending the bids that we receive once we place the project out to bid. I'm sure there's probably questions on that, so I'll stop there.
Do you feel confident that you're going to be able to get this funded without hitting up the homeowners again?
If we do have to, it'll be minimal. Like I said,
Okay.
we have 13 million. It's going to largely depend on the bids that we receive, but we still have applications in review with FEMA, as well as I've made contact with Lee County to either amend our current interlocal agreement, which is a 21% funding vehicle right now, or to pursue a new one, whichever is the best legal option.
Daniel, how confident are you that you're gonna be able to get this constructed and completed before the next hurricane season? It seems to me that would be terrific, but it does seem like a bit of a challenge.
We're definitely pushing hard towards it. Still in its infancy. If we can control up to the bids, and we're definitely going to prioritize having it in prior to hurricane season. I believe we can get it done.
Good.
I know it's a large task, but we're pushing hard for it.
Well, it'd be fantastic because I think everybody's assessment is that beach renourishment in the past was a lifesaver for Captiva. I think that if we get through this hurricane season without a hurricane that hits us directly, that would be great. But I don't think we want to take a chance for another hurricane season.
Absolutely. And I do want to highlight also, I know it's been some concern from some of the homeowners in regards to the dunes, that this full beach nourishment would incorporate a dune repair as well as dune plantings to secure the dune prior to. So that would all be inclusive in one project.
That would be terrific.
Great. And finally, as everyone's alluded to, and I saw the panel had sent out that memo, as Jeff said, that we did receive $1 million contribution from the state that's to be allocated towards dune walkovers. The beach vehicles, a minor part of that, as well as lost revenue from the Allison Hagerot parking lot. So we're excited for that, and we're definitely appreciative of our political sponsors that help push that through.
Anything else for Daniel?
No.
Thanks, Dan. South Seas, Bob Walter, you still around?
Bob is left.
Yeah, Bob is left. Okay. I've got something called additional updates from David Mintz.
Did you want an SCCF update?
Yeah, Jay, you skipped SCCF.
I did? Oh,
No problem.
good. Okay. Sorry about that, Matt.
No worries. Yeah, apart from all the stuff that was gone over earlier, and we're happy to provide research, depending on which way the community goes, and whatever other help we can in this process. The other big things that we're really looking at right now is the lake height. That's got us all on edge. It's past 16 feet this weekend. And right now, as far as the Army Corps is concerned, this is nothing to get excited about. There's still bankings. We're not expecting any releases. And they're correct in the current assessment as long as nothing else happens. So as long as we don't get major rain on the lake, as long as no storm systems move through. I know we're getting to the end of hurricane season, but there's still a couple formations we're eyeing. And as long as El Nino stays off, we've been hearing talk of it being potentially called a super El Nino, which is a forecasting distinction. So it's one of those things we won't know if we've had a super El Nino until we've had it. But regardless, El Nino brings wetter dry seasons generally. So sitting at 16 feet going into a potentially wet dry season, we're expecting discharges to be a matter of when, not if. And if that happens, we all know how the water quality tanks around those. We did get some update last Friday from the Corps that the biological opinion that is the document that's holding up LOSUM has been received by the Corps, and under their evaluation, it won't make any changes to the proposed water control plan. So that's good news. The caveat to that was they don't know when the dates of the record of decision release will be, or the final BIOP that will be contained in that. So as far as no news and no updates on that, that means we're still looking at December, January potentially for LOSUM being started. So that could coincide well with any El Nino activity, but we're hoping to know more by the end of this week.
Okay, anything else, Matt?
Nope, not unless there's any questions.
Questions for Matt? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, David, additional updates. You have anything else you want to talk about?
I do not.
Okay. Wastewater committee. We are still, the overall wastewater project is still hung up on Sanibel completing their consulting study on what they will do with the additional processed wastewater that would come from processing Captiva's wastewater. The study was completed. It was presented to Sanibel staff. Sanibel staff had a number of questions about it, which are back to the consultant for resolution. I'm hopeful in the next few weeks we'll get the study so we can understand what issues they're going to have and how much that's going to increase the cost of the project. I've had some conversations with Sanibel leadership regarding whether or not the BOCC decision, which, creates the threat of increased density on Captiva, has diminished Sanibel's desire to process our wastewater. And the feedback I'm getting is that they still have a high level of interest in following through on the project, even though we're at risk of Central Sewer possibly providing a vehicle for additional development on Captiva. So anybody have questions on wastewater? Stormwater committee update, Linda.
Well, David's the one who is the interface. He's actually on the phone right now, but he's the interface for the stormwater. So I don't know if there's anything new going on there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on a phone call. Our stormwater proposal for Kimley Horn has been sent up through the channels to get funded through the county, and we're waiting for that to get processed. I contacted the county before this meeting, and my understanding that it's in process, but I'll get more information for the next meeting. Hopefully it'll be funded by then.
Okay, so again, this is to get $200,000 to fund Timley Horn developing a stormwater management plan for the village area.
Exactly.
Okay. Iguanas.
Okay, Jay, yeah, 3 weeks ago, Alfredo started coming out 2 days a week and setting traps. And his feeling is traps haven't been doing that good. He thinks that maybe there's too much vegetation around, that the iguanas, he puts a flower in the trap for bait. And he just feels there's too much vegetation right now. Unless he sets the trap right in front of him, it might be a waste of time. He thinks like in one day he takes an hour and a half devoted to the traps. He can get his more in an hour and a half than messing with the traps. And
Okay.
he shoots probably the iguanas he gets, probably 95% of them are shot. And then the traps a little bit, and then snaring, and then he snares them. But definitely the shooting them is the way to go. So he feels he doesn't need to do the traps.
Okay, so he's gonna shoot him 2 times a week now instead of 1 time a week, is that?
Right. Just continue with what he was doing, but 2 days a week instead of one. And but question maybe for Dave is, I know the county was committed to paying the 25,000 1 day a week. And is the panel picking up the other day, or do we think the county could pay for that?
Well, I just remember that we agreed at one of the previous panel meetings that the panel, regardless of what the county did, the panel would pick up the second day.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it behooves us to try to get the second day reimbursed from the county. And I think we should try to do that regardless. But I think we needed a second day because we were getting overrun by the iguanas. Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it too was we said the panel was gonna pick it up for 6 months and see if it was making a significant difference.
Yeah, and revisit it.
on the
Okay.
Second day.
Commit to 6 months. Okay. Yep.
David, we haven't gotten any money from the county yet. Is there anything I need to do about that? They've been invoiced a couple times.
Yeah, I would invoice it. Who are you invoicing it to?
I think it was to Wayne's office.
Okay, yeah, I would do it one more time, and then I'll make a phone call.
Okay, nominating committee. As we discussed at the last meeting, Linda Laird will fill the open panel position for an additional 3-year term. The other 2 appointments were to be made by CPOA, and Renee, after consulting with his other CPOA people, is designating their panel members to be Bruce McDonald for a second 3-year term and Ken Suarez as their second nominee. So Ken Suarez will be joining the panel as a CPOA nominee in January.
Ken Suarez is the chairman of the Council of Homeowners Associations and Condominium Associations in South Seas, and represents basically the majority of the owners in terms of acreage and units on South Seas. And
yeah, I think this is an excellent choice by CPOA. Ken represents a very large constituency on the island, and so, I think it'll be great to have him be, on the panel. Development Committee. Ann Brady, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do. Can I just ask a question about the nominating committee? So that means Bob Walter is off at the end of this year?
That's correct.
And so I guess Ken Suarez is kind of the South Seas representative then?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So development committee, I was talking to Ken Guterham. We were discussing the welcome back cruise and wanted to see if the panel thought it was a good idea to have a comeback. We haven't had one since 2019. If we wanted to do it again. The Captiva Cruises was contacted and they are willing to donate the boat with the cash bar. We looked at some dates. It's typically been on a Monday. And so avoiding conflicts with other events, we were looking at January 8th. So obviously the date can be, we can have some wiggle room, but I'm just wondering if there's a consensus that we'd like to have a welcome back cruise.
I think it, would be a good idea. Do we raise what from a welcome back cruise? Maybe 10,000, something like that?
Ken, I don't remember. I mean, I think tickets are $100 a person.
More than that. I think we're more in the 25,000 range.
Okay.
Just goodwill, I think, to put it together. It gets people talking, especially with all the Zoom calls. It's kind of nice to have a head-to-head thing in January. Whether January 8th is too early, I don't know, but somewhere in January for sure. But I like the idea myself.
Yeah, I think we should, provide our constituents an opportunity to speak with us face to face, and it's another way for us to hear from them.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
I think they also had the January 22nd open and there wasn't a conflict. So that's also, if you think maybe a little bit later in January is better.
I think January 22nd might be better. You might have still some people not coming back from the holidays.
Yeah.
If,
Okay.
Or
All right.
waiting for
Look
the
at
house
that.
to get done.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. We'll have more information available at the next meeting.
But we're saying right now, January 22nd for, I don't know, maybe we need a different name than Welcome Back since it's mid-season, but I don't know. We'll leave that to your creativity.
Yeah.
Welcome back after 4.5 years. How about that?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Welcome, Warriors.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll work with Ken and as I said, we'll put out some information. Maybe a save the date will be the next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Good. Good. Thank you, man.
And I think there's a whole bunch of people, including many on Sanibel and other parts of Lee County, that we've been in touch with and working with since this issue arose with the Captiva Code. And so I could just talk to you about some invitations we might not have thought about making before that we should make now.
You mean putting people on our mailing list who are not on our mailing list?
Yeah, and specifically inviting them to the cruise.
I see. Okay, sure.
Yeah, some of the major players in the
Yeah.
effort with the BOCC.
Yeah, you're
Yep.
going to be limited to 100 people too, probably, right?
I don't know what the limitation is on the boat. Do you, Ken?
Yeah. Well, we're doing the historical deal in November on the historical committee, and we're limiting it to 100 people to do that. So you might be able to put more, but if
Yeah.
you're going to get anything to eat or not, that's another
Yeah.
thing. Okay.
Okay. Yep, that's helpful. All right. Thank you.
Hey, Ken, you want to talk about our money?
We still have some, as you can see by the packet. We still have a large amount that is in escrow because we haven't been asked to pay anybody's bills yet. So that's deceptive, but we're in good shape for the short term and be ready to do some other fundraising. On the other front, I haven't been able to get a better quote for the additional directors and officers insurance coverage. So I'm going to buy the extra $1 million for $1,500 this year. That will be bound probably today or tomorrow. They just got me the
Okay.
invoice last night.
I think that's good. Okay, other comments from panel members?
We secure the Captiva Community Panel jet in case we have to go to Tallahassee, and how many people?
Oh,
does that
yeah,
have
right,
hold?
good. Good point. I'll call the pilots. Ken,
No,
is there anything from the audience we have not addressed?
We had one comment about the Ken Suarez appointment, which we don't have any control over, so I guess it may be a moot point, but he just stating some observation that he does not represent the resort and that it might be the worst thing the panel could have done. Just as a reminder, the panel doesn't appoint, that was a CPOA appointment.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, I think we've covered everything. Does anybody have anything else that we've missed?
I think we should all be quite pleased with the progress we've made. We haven't won some big battles, but we're together. We're united. We're going forward. I think we should all be very pleased where we are and what we're doing in terms of taking care of the island. And we've got some, right now we're getting some wins in CEPD. Hallelujah.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. For sure.
We're you know, we've lost some, but we as a group, as Captiva, are moving forward very well. So sometimes it's good to just sit and remember that and be grateful for where we are and happy about it. That was all.
That uplifting comment, should we close? Should we close the meeting?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
All right.
Okay, see you all next month. Thank you.
Thanks,
Jay.
Jay. Thanks, everyone.
Jay. Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody.